In 2023, HP pushed a firmware update to over 100 million printers worldwide. Overnight, every third-party ink cartridge stopped working. Not because the ink was bad, not because the cartridge was defective, because a chip inside the cartridge failed an authentication handshake with a chip inside the printer. The ink was fine. The printer refused to use it. People who had printed with the same cartridges for years woke up to an error message on a machine they already owned, already paid for, and had been using without a single problem the day before. HP called it a security feature. A class action lawsuit called it something else. But the firmware update was not the real trick. The real system is built into the cartridge itself, and that firmware update is only one piece of a system that has been quietly engineered over the last 2 decades to turn your printer into a subscription machine, one that decides when your ink is empty, decides which cartridges you are allowed to use, and decides when the printer itself has printed enough pages to declare itself broken. Today, I am going to show you exactly how that system works. I am going to take apart the 3 mechanisms printer manufacturers use to force you into buying their ink at a 10,000% markup. And then I am going to show you the one type of printer that sidesteps all of it. The same type that IT departments buy in bulk and never think about again. Here is what is inside every inkjet cartridge sold by HP, Canon, and Epson. There is a plastic reservoir that holds the ink. There is a print head or a nozzle plate. And then there is a small circuit board soldered to the side of the cartridge with a chip on it. That chip does not improve print quality. It does not protect your printer. It does not do anything for you at all. What it does is communicate. Every time you insert a cartridge, the chip sends an authentication signal to the printer's firmware. The firmware checks whether the chip was manufactured by the original brand. If the handshake fails, the printer displays an error and refuses to print. Your ink cartridge becomes a plastic brick. This is DRM for ink. Third-party cartridge manufacturers figured this out years ago. They started reverse engineering the chip and cloning the authentication protocol so their cartridges would pass the handshake. They sold compatible cartridges for 1/3 of the price. Consumers saved hundreds of dollars a year, so HP changed the firmware. They pushed updates, sometimes silently, sometimes disguised as security patches that altered the authentication protocol. Cartridges that worked on Monday stopped working on Tuesday. Not because anything changed physically, because the software moved the goalposts. And here is the part that should concern you. These firmware updates were pushed automatically. You did not consent to them. In many cases, you did not even know they happened. A product you already owned was remotely altered to reject a product you already bought. That is not a security feature. That is a toll booth between you and your own ink. But the DRM chip is only half the cartridge scam. What they did to the ink level reporting is where it gets insulting. Your printer tells you when your ink is low. You have seen the warning. Replace cartridge. Ink level critical. Here is what actually triggers that warning. It is not a sensor measuring how much ink is in the cartridge. Most consumer inkjet cartridges do not have an ink level sensor inside them. What they have is a page counter. The chip tracks how many pages you have printed and estimates, based on a conservative factory formula, when the ink should be running low. The word conservative is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Independent testing has shown that when a printer declares a cartridge empty, there can be 20 to 40% of the ink still inside. 40%. You are throwing away cartridges that are nearly half full because a chip told you they were done, and you cannot override it. The printer will not let you print past the counter. It does not matter that the ink is physically present. The chip says stop. The printer stops. This is where the math gets painful. A set of genuine HP ink cartridges for a standard home inkjet runs between $50 and $70. If the printer is discarding cartridges at 60% usage, you are effectively paying full price for 60% of the ink. Over 5 years of average home printing, you will spend more on ink than you paid for the printer. Twice over. HP's ink division generates billions in revenue every year. Not from printers, from cartridges. The printer is the razor, the ink is the blade. Except the razor also has firmware that rejects off-brand blades. That is not a metaphor. That is the actual business model. It is described in their investor filings. But even if you accept the cartridge DRM and the phantom ink warnings, there is a third mechanism that most people never discover until it is too late. The page counter is not just tracking your ink. Inside every inkjet printer, there is a component called a waste ink absorber. It is a sponge, literally a pad of absorbent material that collects excess ink from printhead cleaning cycles. Every time the printer starts up, every time it runs a maintenance routine, it dumps a small amount of ink onto this sponge. Over time, the sponge fills up, and the printer knows exactly when it is going to declare the sponge full, because it is not measuring saturation. It is counting cleaning cycles. When the counter hits a predetermined number, the printer locks itself completely. It displays an error, usually something like, "A printer component has reached the end of its service life," and it refuses to print another page. The sponge may or may not actually be full. It does not matter. The counter says it is done. The printer is done. Now here is where this becomes a designed trap. Epson charges between $100 and $200 to service this issue. For most consumer models, the service costs more than the printer. And the user's other option is a software reset tool that Epson does not provide, does not support, and in some cases, has actively tried to block. You bought a printer. It stopped working. Not because any part failed, not because any component wore out, but because a counter hit a number. The machine bricked itself on a schedule. That is not maintenance. That is a kill switch. And here is what connects all three of these mechanisms. The DRM chip forces you into expensive ink. The phantom ink counter makes you throw away cartridges early. And the waste ink counter makes you throw away the entire printer on a timeline the manufacturer chose before you ever opened the box. Every piece of this system was designed. Not one part of it is an accident. If you have owned more than one inkjet printer in the last decade, you have probably already seen this cycle. The cartridge warnings, the mysterious errors. The moment you realize it costs more to fix than to replace, that is not bad luck. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. So if the entire inkjet ecosystem is built on artificial scarcity, DRM lockdowns, and planned expiration, what do you actually buy? The answer is the same answer that every IT department, every small business owner, and every university print lab arrived at years ago. You buy a laser printer. Number 1. Brother HLL 2460DW. This is a monochrome laser printer. It does not use ink. It uses toner, a dry powder sealed in a cartridge with no DRM chip. Brother does not firmware lock their toner cartridges. Third-party toner works. It has worked for years. It continues to work after firmware updates. A genuine Brother toner cartridge costs about $50 and prints roughly 3,000 pages. A compatible third-party cartridge costs $15 and prints the same. At average home use, you will replace the cartridge once a year, maybe less. There is no waste ink sponge. There is no cleaning cycle dumping toner into a pad. The mechanical components, the drum, the fuser, are rated for tens of thousands of pages and are individually replaceable when they eventually wear. The printer itself costs around $150. It will outlast 3 inkjet printers and cost less to operate than one. Number 2. HP LaserJet M211DW. Yes, HP. The same company running the inkjet cartridge scam makes a laser printer that avoids most of it. The LaserJet line uses toner cartridges that are simpler, cheaper per page, and not subject to the same DRM escalation as the inkjet line. Compatible third-party toner is widely available and widely functional. It is not perfect. HP has experimented with subscription models and firmware restrictions on the LaserJet line too. But the economics of toner are fundamentally different from ink. The margins are lower, the cartridges last longer, and the business model is not built on forcing you to replace consumables every few weeks. Check that firmware auto-update is disabled. That is your one action item with any HP product. Number 3. If you need color, Brother MFC L3780CDW. This is a color laser all-in-one. Scans, copies, prints in color. The toner is not DRM locked. Third-party cartridges are available. The cost per color page is a fraction of any inkjet on the market. It costs more up front, around $400. But run the 5-year math. A $200 inkjet plus $300 a year in ink cartridges is $1,700 over 5 years. This printer plus third-party toner is under $600 for the same period. The expensive printer is the cheap printer. The one-line buying rule. If it uses wet ink, a DRM chip, and a waste ink counter, you are not buying a printer. You are signing up for a subscription with a hardware deposit. Buy the laser, skip the trap. One thing you can do right now, today, regardless of what printer you own. Go into your printer's settings. Look for automatic firmware updates. Turn them off. On HP printers, go to the EWS panel. Type your printer's IP address into a browser, navigate to Printer Update, and set it to Do Not Check for Updates. On Epson, open the Epson Software Updater on your computer and disable automatic checks. Firmware updates are how they change the rules after you have already bought the product. Turning off auto update does not fix everything, but it stops them from making it worse while you sleep. Printers should print. That is it. That is the entire job description. They should accept ink. They should put it on paper. And they should keep doing it until an actual mechanical component physically wears out. Not until a chip says stop. Not until a counter hits a number. Not until a firmware update decides your cartridge is no longer authorized. You paid for the machine. You own the machine. The ink inside a third-party cartridge is chemically identical to the ink inside the original. The only difference is a chip that exists for one reason: to make sure the money flows in one direction. Stop buying the cartridge. Start buying the printer that does not need one. But printers are not the only hardware sitting on your desk with a kill switch built in. The exact same counter logic, the same planned expiration philosophy, has already been engineered into the devices you use every single day. Different product, different chip, same system. Keep watching. This rabbit hole goes deeper than you think.